Hello. The 1964-1965 World's Fair was a little bit cringe. It's not just me being mean. Like, it was widely thought to be kind of corny and at odds with what was happening in the world in like the early 60s. Doesn't mean a lot of people didn't go to it though. Now, World's Fairs tended to feature pavilions from countries all over the world, but for reasons I won't get into Robert Moses, the 1964-1965 World's Fair mainly featured American corporations. Instead, Defunctland has a video all about this you can check out if you want more context about the whole thing, but what I want to talk about today is DuPont's exhibit, The Wonderful World of Chemistry, a multimedia stage musical about plastic and some other stuff, but like largely plastic. According to the show's pamphlet, Wonderful World of Chemistry is a free and easy, light and breezy swing through the fascinating world of chemistry. Now, World's Fair exhibits were generally pretty educational, even the ones ostensibly meant to like sell you a Ford. So you hear the name The Wonderful World of Chemistry and expect you're going to learn some chemistry. You won't. The exhibit took place in a 3-room circular theater. Fairgoers were ushered into one of 2 theaters, the Gold or the Blue, where the musical was happening simultaneously, performed by different casts. When that was over, audiences exited into the Red Theater, which has this whole chem lab set up so scientists can do a performance of chemistry demonstrations, which, like, surely we will learn some actual chemistry when we watch that part.
Foreshadowing is a literary device in which...
The musical was composed by Michael Brown, who apparently did some other writing for industrial musicals, but also wrote the songs Lizzie Borden and the John Birch Society. But he seems to be mostly known for this musical. Side note, his Wikipedia page also insinuates that Robert Downey Sr. was a stage manager on The Wonderful World of Chemistry, but I cannot corroborate that at all. There are a few live actors, but they're interacting with screens that slide on and off the stage, and these screens show B-roll, other actors, and these like genuinely very cute animations from Ernest Pintoff, who is a pretty famous animation director. And the animations are credited to Pintoff Productions Incorporated. I do not think they credited the actual animators that I could find. There were a few rotating casts for this thing, and I sourced several different numbers for this, but at the minimum, they performed 40 shows per day, which seems like a lot to me. The show was performed an estimated 14,600 times and was seen by over 5 million people, so it's not like this had no cultural impact. They like sold the soundtrack on vinyl, and it was liked well enough that someone on YouTube even like went through and restored all the musical numbers for both audio and video. Sadly, that version excludes some of the juiciest bits of the show, and so we will be watching a much crunchier version. Now, the first thing you'll notice as we watch this together is that they like to say the name of the company a lot. There's this great quote from a write-up that the official DuPont internal magazine did. One patron suggested that DuPont copy another pavilion's soft sell. Why, they didn't mention their company's name once. That's not unusual, said a DuPont manager with a grin. We didn't mention their name either.
Enchanting hour that there could be, where imagination is fancy-free, in the wonderful world of chemistry. Beginning now, beginning at the beginning now.
Lights come up, we see the screen that I previously mentioned, and our host, which this guy's just gonna be in a suit and talk to you a lot.
When the world was new and the fire had subsided,
we basically get the DuPont version of A Brief History of the World, I guess, which is worse. Here are those Ernest Pintoff animations I mentioned, and we start with a caveman, and then we skip all the way to ancient Greece, who they insinuate are stupid, and then we skip to alchemists, which they insinuate are stupid.
yes, well, the alchemists experimented, all right, but they never seemed to think.
I have a lot of problems with this. I spent a decent chunk of this year working on a large, long SciShow episode about how alchemists were basically just chemists, and so I take personal offense to this section. And then when we get to the part of history that they deem useful, they seem to be pinning the entire origin of chemistry on one guy named
Antoine Lavoisier.
And I wonder why they're doing that.
But Lavoisier left an apprentice, a young man named E.I. DuPont.
Oh, That's why.
Now, what has chemical research brought us? Well, some of you may recall when nylon stockings first came on the market.
And we have the beginning of the misogyny.
Hello there, Mrs. Weston. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes, I remember.
Mrs. Weston. The pamphlet describes her as slightly giddy and knowing somewhat less than the rest of us about chemistry. She's the stupid woman they trot out anytime there's something vaguely woman-related with one of their products, i.e. nylons or cleaning. They're like genuinely really mean to her over the course of this show. Of course, they have to make a joke about how she's pretending to be younger than she is.
You know, they were introduced at the 1939 New York World's Fair, 26 years ago.
Of course, I was just a child.
It's kind of hard to tell from this grainy footage, but she is not a live actor. She, much like the little alchemy guy, lives on the screen. And some of this timing is, you know, like genuinely impressive. Like watch them blow out the candles on this birthday cake.
Oh, I'll get it.
They talk a little bit more about the history of the company with explosives, and then they make fun of the alchemy guy again, which I feel so bad for him, and I just genuinely want this to be a GIF. And at this point, the rest of the show is just, here's a DuPont product, and here's why it's good. We start off with Cellophane. They have this whole bit about a grocery store from 1915 that didn't have any cellophane in it. And because it didn't have any cellophane in it, it means it was super unsanitary, and just watch.
Some of your delicious ginger snaps.
Got them right here? Oh, come on, Tiger. Love those snaps.
I'm sure there's a lot more gross stuff happening here,
How'd that get in there?
but it is genuinely so hard to make out with the grainy footage. And then they fast forward to 1965 and they show a, for the time, modern grocery store. And the key point here is that it does have cellophane. Some context that this doesn't tell you is that in the 50 years between grocery store A and grocery store B, grocery stores switched from a model where you went up to a grocer and asked them to get stuff for you to a model where people shopped for themselves. There were aisles. People walked down the aisles to pick out the thing themselves instead of somebody else getting it for them. They like allude to this.
Oh, if somebody would only invent moisture-proof cellophane and make possible something called a supermarket.
They kind of got it flipped. Piggly Wiggly started doing these self-shop models, and once that started spreading, people realized they could use plastic like cellophane to have bright colors and see-through packaging, both of which are good advertisements for the thing that you were trying to sell to somebody. I'm not saying that there like weren't sanitary concerns, but there were a couple different motives for switching to cellophane here. And now we're gonna have, honestly, quite a bop of a musical number, which they introduce by saying,
Well, let's discuss one of the simplest things in the world.
My husband.
haha, I hate my spouse.
Mrs. Weston, no, molecules.
When you hear discussing molecules, what do you think that means? Is it A, how atoms combine to get molecules? B, how molecules are the smallest unit you can have of any individual compound? Or C, listing household objects that contain plastic? If you guessed C, you won! But we all lost.
There are plastics in your toaster, in the blender and the clock.
The song is genuinely like not even about molecules. They're just listing things that plastic's in.
In a bottle made for squeezing or a tray for freezing. With the plastic, you're at home.
This song also has a very similar meter to that one Cardi B song, and it has created a type of brain poison for me.
There are plastics in your toaster,
I like those Balenciagas.
in the blender and the clock,
The ones that look like socks.
in the lamp and in the roaster,
I like going to the Tula.
on the door and in the lock.
I put box all in my wallet.
Since that taught us nothing, I'm gonna teach you about plastic. So plastic is not one thing. Plastic is a blanket name that we give to a bunch of different compounds that kind of mimic what we can find in nature, but are not natural themselves. I'm gonna quote this literally from my master's thesis because it's the easiest thing for me to do right now. The term plastic is used to refer to the group of synthetic materials that are plastic, as in they are moldable to an extent, but they are also sturdy. Before synthetic plastic, there were materials that were derived from nature that had plastic-like properties, including shellac, which is made from crushed beetles, rubber from tree sap, and ivory tusks. Plastic materials were developed mostly to replicate materials found in nature, and much of the early industrial revolution plastics combined organic as well as synthetic materials. We're talking about things like celluloid, which were created from plants, at least partially. There's one called Galalith, which was made from milk proteins and formaldehyde, so, you know, it's formaldehyde. And then what really turned it around was Bakelite, which was developed by Leo Baekeland, created from phenol and again formaldehyde, and that is considered the first fully synthetic plastic. Leading into World War II, plastic research kind of exploded, and so people were able to create all of these different compounds, all of which are different plastic molecules that can do different things but share this giant blanket name. And all the people who made these plastics fetishized innovation. There's this big emphasis on the fact that Bakelite in particular is the point when humans stopped trying to imitate nature and then started to improve on it. These plastic materials were considered this type of mastery over nature, and you see a lot of that attitude in this show.
Oh, what do you put in a mixture to make molecules like those?
You know, I feel like telling us what's in there is probably your job.
But plastics aren't the only things that chemical research has created. For example, there's Valclean, to fill the need for machine dry cleaning. Easy to do.
It wouldn't be a musical from the 1960s without a patter song. And then because we're talking about cleaning stuff, guess who comes back?
Sepel, to fill the need for a fabric.
Reading this one. It would clean without a trace if you got a pie right in the face.
Mrs. Winston.
Yes.
They are so mean to her. And then we get to Freon.
Mrs. Weston and girls, Freon is a
Which if you hear the audience laugh here, it's because those are two men in drag. Haha, men dressed as women inherently funny.
We want to play our Freon serenade.
Because women be using hairspray. Thank God this is a pre-recorded segment and not something they did live, because if so, every squish of the can would be part of the ozone layer that's stripped away. You see Freon, which is the thing that makes the air go out of there. It's a CFC, which is a chlorofluorocarbon, which is the stuff that made the ozone layer kind of disintegrate for a few decades there. It's doing a lot better though. Shout out ozone layer. I wish I could heal the way that you have.
All these products are from DuPont. DuPont, 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 DuPont.
I'm glad I didn't make this into a drinking game.
It's time now to see something beautiful.
Oh, what's that?
Fashion.
Did he say fashion?
Women be fashioned. So it's a musical number where they basically just introduce you to the 5 DuPont fashion products that they are talking about.
With Antron and Nylon and Lycra
and Orla and Dayfra, the world's a better place.
And then there is 4 full minutes of a fashion show of people just walking out wearing clothes made from those materials. For a fun gender moment from the supplementary materials, overheard appraisal from a middle-aged couple. He, there's too much on fashion. She, there's not nearly enough. Gender.
300 years ago, when Sir Isaac Newton lay dying.
Get Isaac Newton's name out of your alchemy slandering mouth. Now we get into a little musical number where they introduce Corfam.
What's that? Everyone knows. What's that music they're playing? Where's that? Everyone goes. Down each street, the neatest feet are wearing Corfam shoes.
Which they want so hard to be Nylon too. Like, I cannot stress enough how important Nylon was. And they are like pushing Corfam hard to be that again.
Come along, you'll walk on air. What's that beautiful?
They show off the main application for Corfam here as shoes. And Corfam shoes were widely considered a failure in the shoe market.
We're gonna have shoes like we've never had shoes before.
And then we're not gonna have those shoes because people didn't buy them. Corfam was meant to be a synthetic replacement for leather that was also waterproof. Now, when I say replacement for leather, also waterproof, what does that say to you? Because to me, that says vinyl, which is basically what Corfam lost to.
When you wear Corfam shoes.
And they can't end the musical portion of the show without some genuine non sequitur racism for no reason.
You know, that's a nylon rope.
This literally connects to nothing else in the show. They literally just wanted to have a little racism out the door. Baffling. The 5 live actors take a bow, and there's one final little musical number.
The promise of DuPont.
The curtains close, the audience goes into the red room, and now we have the chemistry demonstration portion.
For the next few minutes, we'd like to show you some of the magical things that chemistry has learned to do with molecules.
Chemists learn to do things. Chemistry is a field of science and is not sentient and therefore cannot itself learn. I know that could just be like a trick of writing, but like it's intentional because the whole thing is that the company tries to take credit for stuff and not like the individuals who are actually doing the work. First we have a Freon demonstration, and please listen to the way this man says temperature.
At a temperature of 100 degrees below zero.
They dip a flower into the Freon and we get some vintage ASMR. I didn't say it would be good ASMR. There are some unhinged jokes in this section that I genuinely find like really funny.
Now, if anybody doesn't behave, we'll dip them into the Freon.
But I am a sucker for like this specific kind of audience interaction, pre-scripted humor. I was the kind of person who liked the Poseidon's walkthrough adventure at Islands of Adventure. I have bad taste.
Let's have a look at some molecules that are quite emotional. They're like us. When calm, they are clear. But when agitated, they turn blue.
Wow, that is actually
Now we
really
mix them
cool.
up.
How did they do that?
A little longer to calm down than it did to become worked up. But if you watch, you'll see that when things are quiet
How did
and
they
they
do
are
that?
once more at rest, everything clears up again.
Why does it change color? They didn't even say what was in the jar. What is it? How does it change color? I can't even research what it is because they didn't say what the chemical in the jar is. Why does it do that?
David, let's not annoy the molecules.
To my point earlier about like the whole improving on nature, they compare adiprene to rubber and show how much better performing adiprene is to rubber in this use case.
Get back to our adiprene and natural rubber at 100 degrees below zero. We're going to drop a heavy weight on each kind and see what happens to them. First, the adiprene. Frozen solid. Adiprene remains efficient, just as it does on rocket ships and in the Arctic. But what about ordinary rubber at the same temperature? It may never bounce again.
This is the whole mastery over nature bend that, again, permeates this entire show and much of the advertising from these kind of companies at the time. And once again, we gotta come back to Nylon. It's the greatest hit.
And one of those discoveries was the creation of Nylon, which, as someone once said, changed the lives of all of us and the legs of half of us.
Gender. Honestly, though, could have been worse. Feels like laughing with women, not at women. And now they're gonna make nylon in front of you, which is genuinely really cool because you just pull it, like it comes out as a rope. So what do you put in there to get nylon?
Now, one of these liquids contains one kind of molecule and the other another.
That's specific. These are the chemicals that are in there somewhere. You can like do this experiment in science class, and I'm gonna put a link in the description of like how to do it. Please be safe though. If you listen really carefully, you can hear the song from before that's like, with nylon inside. And then this guy holds a piece of molten nickel that is
Heated to the temperature of
1800 degrees Fahrenheit in his bare hand, and it's able to do so because of honestly, a material that I cannot understand what they are saying because
thin sheet of Typersul.
the sound on this is so crunchy.
Typersul is just one more example of man-made molecules that nature didn't get around to.
There it is again, the mastery over nature thing. It's like very constant. They talk about Mylar, how it's in some space stuff, makes some annoying noises. And then they dump a bunch of chemicals into each other, and then they change colors as they have some kind of chemical reaction in those jars. I gave you more information than they did by saying the word chemical reaction. We have no idea what's in the jars. We have no idea why what is happening is happening.
Very nice. Flawlessly done. Thank you, gentlemen.
if you have not noticed by now, this entire thing is modeled off of a magic show. A thing where they famously don't tell you how things work, which I just feel like is a very bad choice when you're talking about chemistry. They do the same thing where there's some kind of delayed chemical reaction and then it turns colors instantly, which again is very cool, but what are the molecules and what is happening? Now they show us another material and they actually kind of teach you about it.
Now this is a tube of Baymau, and it's unusual because when at rest, as it is now, it is a solid, as you can see. But when in motion, the Baymau becomes a liquid. Now let me shake it and perhaps you can hear it. Now you'll notice that the paint doesn't drip because, like the Baymau in the tube, it's in its solid state. But when one paints with Clearside paint, the motion of the brush turns it into an easy flowing liquid.
Because they tell you a property of the chemical and then explain why that is good in its application. We are taking the bare minimum here. They show how plastic can be used for light conduction, and then they do this kind of light show with lights all around the theater. And of course, the finale of the light show is DuPont, product names, and logo. That is the end of the show. If I had to assign a theme to this show, it would be everything before DuPont was bad, and now everything is good, and it's thanks to us. DuPont had this obsession with thinking of itself as, like, making the world a better place.
Better things for better living through chemistry for the finer world we want.
It's that one scene from Silicon Valley.
We're making the world a better place through Paxos algorithms for consensus protocols.
And we're making the world a better place through software-defined data centers for cloud computing.
Another takeaway is obviously how little they cared about actually educating people about the science and how much the emphasis is on the company DuPont and its products. This is extremely evident in kind of the entire chemistry demonstration portion. They're using the logic of a magic show and then taking the aesthetic of science and putting it over top of it and then pretending like everybody is smarter at the end. And they are pretending like everybody is smarter. In DuPont's company magazine, visitors find the pavilion's 70 youth hosts and hostesses among the most knowledgeable people at the fair. Ask what she's wearing and she'll tell you her stockings are of nylon, her blouse and blazer are of Dacron polyester and cotton, and that her shoes are made of Corfam polymeric material. And on the way home at night, she carries a lipstick-sized aerosol spray tube of Rebuff, which does just that to would-be molesters. Interesting about the molesters. But again, the only thing that they care that you learn is the name of their product. I don't know, man. It's just like, imagine if Bill Nye was like, buy Coca-Cola. It has bubbles. And then didn't tell you anything about why the bubbles were there, or why it's the color that it is, or that it's acidic. Like, nothing. Nothing. Anyway, thank you for watching this very weird piece of history with me. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to say thank you, there are a few things you can do. You can like the video. You can subscribe to this channel if you are not already. You can hype the video if that option is unlocked. I doubt I will have it unlocked by the time you're seeing this, but we will see. And if you really, really want to say thank you, you can do the buy me a coffee thing. My New Year's resolution is to post one new thing every month. And so if it is February 2026 and you are watching this video and I haven't posted anything since then, you need to yell at me. Thank you, bye.